Here's some course content related to mission and vision, or vision and mission, whichever you prefer. The truth is that within the field of leadership studies, there's no firm agreement on which one means which. Here's what's important. You need to know that there is a distinction between a mission statement and a vision statement, and be able to communicate that well, because they are two different things. That we're all in agreement on. This is an important topic for leaders to understand, and I want to talk about the domains of strategic leadership. Now, most of this comes from Richard Daft, but in the words of Raymond Loewy, never leave well enough alone. So, of course, I'm going to add a few things here for you to think about, because that's what I do. The domains of strategic leadership are, of course, first of all, vision. That top, where do we hope to get to? What do we hope to be? What is our big picture vision for who we are? Mission, then, is a step below that, and that is the how do we accomplish that mission? What does the mission look like played out, lived out, worked out? So those two pieces, that's the order that I'm putting in for the purposes of this discussion. But unfortunately, so often, discussions end there. That's where this vision and mission discussion frequently ends, and that really needs to be just the starting point. Because after that, you need to think about strategy. You need to think about architecture for alignment. You need to talk about what are your tactics and what does day-to-day work look like. Now, I have talked for years about this idea of pressing leadership. That means upper levels of leadership making an effort to ensure that people at all levels of an organizational chart understand why their work matters. And that's the job of pressing leadership. For instance, if you have a look at mission and vision, that is clearly the responsibility of senior level leadership. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? This is high level thinking. But when you move into this area of mission to strategy, you're really talking about mid-level leadership, people who are responsible for setting the strategic direction of various parts of an organization, whether that's a division or a department or even just a work group. So mission moving into strategy in the responsibility of mid-level leadership. Now, what is often overlooked in this is something that Daft has omitted from some of his recent work, but this is included in his text from 2007. It's the idea of architecture for alignment. And architecture for alignment has absolutely nothing to do with architecture and everything to do with alignment. In other words, how do we structure this organization in order to do that? There are various approaches to that. Do we have people all from the same department working together? Do we have cross-departmental work working together? How do we structure this? And that architecture for alignment, I think, is one of the most difficult, one of the most challenging pieces of leadership, because it has to be thought through and it has to be intentional. I want to clarify this idea with something from an ancient manuscript. This is actually from 1992, a brilliant book called Organizational Architecture. And Mark Gerstein makes this observation. Quote, "We might define organizational architecture as the art of shaping organizational space to meet human needs and aspirations. Organizational architects work in the behavioral space in which people act, creating opportunities for action, which we often call empowerment, and creating constraints to action are central to the organizational architect's job." End quote. Finally, that organizational architecture gets played out in tactics, in what does our day-to-day work look like. And that's the responsibility of everybody who does actual work at whatever level of the organization. You need to understand, each individual needs to understand how their tactics and day-to-day work connects to what the organization is trying to accomplish. If they don't, there are problems that ensue. You see, the failure to really do that and communicate that and move that forward will lead to one of three problems. First of all, micromanagement, where senior leadership exerts too much control downward. In other words, defining all of the processes rather than the results. That can be really destructive to an organization. But another failure is abdication of responsibility, where mid-level management fails to develop strategies that support the mission of the organization. And finally, there can be a complete breakdown in the capacity to act. What that means is there's general frustration or anger and inability to find meaning in work because there's no connection to what the organization is trying to accomplish and what people are doing on a day-to-day basis. These are three huge failures that can result from the failure to press leadership downward. Another way to look at this is as strategic dispersion. How do you get the mission and vision down into the rest of an organization? One of the big failures in organizations is having vision and mission meetings, getting everyone together, and then at the end, when it's finally done, saying, there, we've done this, we're really happy about it, now go back to your desks and make it so. For most of us, we will live in the area of strategy and architecture for alignment, as well as, of course, tactics and day-to-day work. But for middle management, strategy and architecture for alignment are some of the most important and useful things that we can do in driving an organization forward. Okay, that's all good theory, but let's figure out how to use that. I'm going to make some connections here, and I'm going to want you to think through some of these connections for how they matter to you and in your organization. Let's talk about strategic models. Let me offer these 5 strategic models: innovation, imitation, cost containment, symbiosis, and dequisition. Now, the first 3 are pretty standard strategic models, and the last 2 are things that I have added because I think they are legitimate, but I think they're often overlooked in terms of strategies. I'm going to walk through each of these and help you understand each a little bit better. The first is innovation, and innovation is what it sounds like, being the first to market with unique products and services. The problem with this as a strategic model is it's fairly expensive because you've got to be constantly reinvesting money into further and further research in order to stay in that innovative position. So this is one of the most expensive sustainability models. It is viable. There are companies, Fortune 500 companies around the Twin Cities that live by this model, and you can probably think of who they are. Innovation is a very significant strategic model. The next is imitation. Now, if this is your model, the challenge you have is staying one step and not 2 steps behind the innovator. Because as the innovator moves things forward, you need to be able to consistently imitate that innovation. It's a very expensive sustainability model, not because you're innovating, but because of that keeping one step and not 2 steps behind. A really great example of an imitative strategic model would be in the generic drug industry, where they need to be able to duplicate what has been innovated, and they need to do so in a way that does not breach copyright and patent law. The third strategic model is cost containment. And cost containment is managing and reducing costs to a minimum while maintaining sustainability. The problem with cost containment is ultimately it winds up creating commodities. And a commodity is anything that its sole distinctive is its cost. For a lot of organizations in competitive settings, cost containment is the preferred strategic model. That's unfortunate, but that's reality. Often when I share these 3 with organizational leaders, they object. They say, well, can't we have 2? Because we're kind of innovation, but cost containment. And my argument is, no, pick one of these 3. And I'll get to the other 2 in just a second, but pick one of these 3 of innovation, imitation, and cost containment, because one of them is going to win out. Now, it may be that you have a particular department, maybe your R&D department is driven by innovation, but if your entire organization's focus is cost containment, there will be a point at which the innovation is not worth the money. And I've seen it happen. So pick one, you can't have 2. The word symbiosis, I've stolen that from biology. And it's really where one creature needs another creature to survive. And there's some kind of a, as they say, symbiotic relationship between the two. This, in a business sense, is thriving by augmenting an existing product or service. And your entire model of sustainability is around interdependency. Anytime you buy a consumer product and it says on the side, compatible with iPhone, you can recognize that this strategic model is in play at that point. And finally, our last strategic model is what I call dequisition. In other words, wanting to be acquired by another business entity. See, this is really typical in, particularly in high-tech world, of there's a one-product innovator and they can't afford to invest in the ongoing expenditures to be able to really keep an innovation model of strategy. They innovated at first, and now they're just looking for a buyer. There's nothing wrong with this model, but it happens a lot. And if you go to trade shows, hang around the outside edge, and you will see organizations whose business model is focused on dequisition. The idea is, please buy us while our innovation is still fresh. See, this is where we connect our domains of strategic leadership with our strategic models. Our mission, vision, strategy, architecture for alignment, and even our tactics in day-to-day work are going to be shaped by, are we an innovator, an imitator, are we cost containment, symbiosis, or dequisition? Those are the key questions that we need to ask and connect about our organizations. If you want to get your domains of strategic leadership right, particularly strategy, architecture for alignment, and tactics, you have to know your strategic model. Know whether you're an innovator, imitator, cost containment, symbiosis, or dequisition model organization. You must know that. Why? Well, because those are the things that shape organizations and the nature of meaningful work. And that's what leadership is about. And now I'm going to ask you to make the connections between the domains of strategic leadership and the strategic models that you see play out within your organization. This is the hard work of leadership, being able to put those domains together in a way that everyone who works in the organization knows how their work matters, knows how it connects to what the organization is trying to accomplish, and their work takes on meaning. If you're able to put this material into practice, you will be an effective leader, an effective manager within an organization, because you will be able to lead people well and you will understand what matters in the big scheme of things. Thank you.